Hey guys, here to help you through day 9 and 10. This was Friday, March 27th and Monday, March 30th assignment. Sorry I'm getting it to you a little late, but I know some of you are a little behind anyway. So, alright, you have a Google Doc to fill in your answers, and you have this PDF to read. So I'm going to start reading section 1, Natural Selection Adaptation. Natural selection is the process by which organisms better adapted to their environment can to survive and reproduce more often. Read about the situation below to learn about an example of natural selection. 2 species of moths were introduced once into a city environment and again into a country environment. One species of moth were gray and the other was green. Both environments have birds that eat the moths as their main source of food. The 2 environments are pictured below. So here we have a city, typical city, and typical country open space. And here are the graphs to show what happened. So this is the survival rate of the 2 moths in these different populations. So this graph is on gray moths and this graph is on green moths. So we have the percent survival of each moth in each city. So in each environment. So in the city, gray moths survived more in the city than they did in the country, but green moths survived more in the country than in the city. If you look at the percent, gray moths, let's see we're counting up by 20, 0, 20, 40, 60. So let's say 50 would be here. We're about 55% of the gray moths survived in the city, and only about maybe 23% survived in the country. So 55%, 20%. For green moths, we had a bigger difference. In the city, we only had maybe about 15% survived in the city, but about 68, maybe 65% survived in the country. So that's the end of section 1. So let's look at the, I think I already wrote some answers in. Yep. What is natural selection? Sorry about that. This is my second time doing this video. My son woke up in the middle of the last one. Okay, so what is natural selection? If you go to the top, it gives you in bold the definition of natural selection. So you can do that one. What color moths survived better in the country? So if you look at the moths, which one had a higher percentage survival in the country? Gray or green? Obviously, green had a better survival rate in the country. So here we put green. Which color of moth survived better in the city? Whoops. So here, remember we said it was almost like 55, and then all the way down here, about 15. So gray moths survived better in the city. How was the environment in the city different from the environment in the country? Now you just have to look at the picture and use some back knowledge to describe the difference in an environment in the city and in the country. Remember, both environments have birds that eat these moths. Doesn't matter on the color of the moth either. So both environments have predators of these moths. So let's just explain the environment. What do you see? What differences? What do you see in city? What do you see in country? Write that here. Does this evidence support the theory of evolution or go against it? Well, think about the theory of evolution. The theory of evolution is that animals and plants have to adapt with their environment in order to survive. So where have gray moths adapted and how? How have green moths adapted and how? Obviously, color is the key here. And think about the surroundings in the country and in the city. And type that here. Now, the best way to do this is I'm working through this, but I'm not really stopping to give you time to write your answers. So in between questions, just pause the video, type in your answer, and then hit play again. So hopefully you guys are all caught up in section 1. If not, you need to pause and let's go to section 2. Section 2, fossils. A fossil is the remains or impression of an organism that lived 10,000 years ago or more. So how are fossils formed anyway? There are several processes that plants and animals or their parts can be preserved. No matter which way preservation occurs, it takes a lot of luck. The following is a list with descriptions answering the question, how are fossils formed? Number 1, freezing. There have been remarkable discoveries of mammoth and woolly rhinoceroses found in ice from Alaska and Siberia. Specimens with flesh, skin, and hair intact have been found. Some of these finds suggest that they were flash frozen with food still in their mouth and stomach. 2, drying. Mummified bodies of animals, including humans, have been discovered in arid parts of the world. The soft tissues, including skin and organs, are preserved for thousands of years because they are completely dried out. Number 3, tar pits. In what is now downtown Los Angeles lies a 23-acre park called the La Brea Tar Pits, officially Hancock Park. Within the park are over 100 pits filled with sticky asphalt or tar. The pits are famous for the number and high quality of fossils that have been pulled from the pits. The fossils date between 10 and 40,000 years old. Asphalt is an excellent preservative. Bones, teeth, shells, the exoskeleton of insects, and even some plant seeds have been pulled from the pits. Number 4, amber, just like in Jurassic Park. Insects, spiders, and even small lizards have been found, nearly perfectly preserved in amber. Picture this. A fly lands on a tree branch near the ocean. While looking for food, it steps in sticky sap from a tree. As the fly struggles to escape, it becomes more and more covered in the sap until it's completely engulfed and suffocates. The tree eventually dies and falls into the swampy water it grew in. Over the course of millions of years, the sap hardens with our fly inside. The sap becomes so hard that it eventually turns into amber, and the ancient fly is preserved. Number 5, carbonization. In this process of fossilization, plant leaves, some soft-bodied parts of fish, reptiles, and marine invertebrates decompose, leaving behind only the carbon, an element that makes up the matter of all living things. This carbon creates an impression in the rock outlining the fossils, sometimes with great detail. Mineralization. This is the most common method of fossil preservation. Minerals fill the cellular spaces and crystallize. The shape of the original plant or animal is preserved as rock. Sometimes the original material is dissolved away, leaving the form and structure, but none of the organic materials remain. All right, so what is a fossil? If you look back, the first sentence gives the definition of a fossil. Number 2, name the 6 ways the material from one living organism can be preserved. Okay, they list 6. So the 6 ways is through freezing, drying, tar pits, and you find the next 3. List those 6 right here. You don't have to describe them. Just list the 6. Okay. All right. So, sorry about that. How old are the fossils that are pulled out of La Brea tar pits? So if you go back to tar pits, right here, how long have they been there? So this talks 23 acres, 100 pits filled with sticky asphalt. The pits are famous for the number. The fossils date between 10 and 40,000 years old. So 10 to 40,000 years old. Okay, how do fossils provide evidence for evolution? So honestly, the answer is not in the reading. You just have to use your knowledge in that brain of yours. How can fossils give evidence that evolution has occurred? I think a great example right here would be this saber-toothed tiger. These are the bones found inside tar pits of a fossilized saber-toothed tiger, and this is what they predict a saber-toothed tiger looked like. Well, what does that look like now that we know of? So how has this fossil helped us understand evolution? You need to write that right here for number 4. Press pause to finish up section 2, and we'll move on to section 3, anatomy. All right, anatomy is the study of structure and organization of living things. Anatomy provides evidence for evolution because scientists can compare the structure and the organization of different organisms to hypothesize how closely related they are to each other. Homologous structures are structures in two different species. Oh goodness, sorry, it's late. That evolved from a common ancestor. They can be similar in the way that are put together and function, what they do, or in both. So example, the type of bones in the arms of penguins, alligators, bats, and humans are all the same, but they have different shapes and uses. So this is the human arm. You have your humerus, radius, ulna, your carpals, your metacarpals, and your phalanges. All of these animals have the exact same bones in the exact same place. They're just different shapes for their use. So obviously a penguin can't have this long arm to use as a flipper. It needs shorter, fatter bones to help it swim. And then an alligator uses it for walking and a bat for flying. So different uses, same bones. These are called homologous structures. Homologous structures have the same function but do not evolve from a common ancestor. These are also evidence for evolution because they show that two organisms that came from different ancestors, but when placed in the same environment, they can evolve the same adaptations. So here's an example. The dragonfly and the bird, pictured below, both use wings to fly. But the internal structures of their wings, the way they develop and built, are different. So obviously, these wings are much different than these wings because of their environment. So a vestibular structure is a structure that has lost all or most of its original function over a long period of time. So we've talked about vestibular structures before. In whales, which right here, the whalebone, the appendix in the human, the tailbone, remember the fish that go blind and have no eyes. We talked about several. So here we go, the vestibular pelvic bone in whales. These whales no longer walk with legs, but still have the hip bones needed to support legs. The image on the right shows the way that scientists believe whales evolved from ancient walking ancestors, which you should have already watched the video on. All right, so let's go to the questions for anatomy. What is anatomy? We go back to the top. Here's the definition of anatomy. What does anatomy provide for evolution? Next slide. Anatomy provides, and then the bolded section. Remember, pause in between so you don't feel overwhelmed, right? Get your answers down. I'm sorry, my camera's on. What are homologous structures? Give an example. Homologous structures, example. What are analogous structures? Analogous structure, example. What are vestibular structures? Vestibular structure, example. How does anatomy provide evidence for evolution? That kind of goes up here with number 2, very similar. So just think about how these body parts show us that animals have to adapt to a certain environment or a way of living or a function. Press pause and we'll move on to station 4. Station 4 is the beginning of Monday's assignment. So if you are only wanting to do one assignment, you could pause the video now and start tomorrow. But while we're at it, let's just get it done. Okay, section 4. Embryology. Embryology is the study of the embryo, an unborn offspring in the process of development. So here's a human embryo at the beginning of birth. Remember, we watched the video of the egg and the sperm meeting, the DNA doubling, and this circle-looking thing becoming a baby. So this is the early stages of that, is what we call an embryo. So this is a turtle embryo, and then the dolphin embryo. So if you look here at the dolphin embryo, it looks an awful lot like the human, minus the tail. All right, that's it. That's all we have for embryology. Let's look at the questions. What is embryology? Here's the definition. What differences can you find between the human, turtle, dolphin, and embryos? So what differences do you see? I will see one. This turtle looks like it's getting a shell. Human's getting an ear. It looks like we have brain growing up here pretty early. A very known wild tail here and here. So there's just a few. What similarities can you find between the human, turtle, and dolphin? Well, the shape is pretty similar. We have a arched back, a vertebrae, limbs, a head, eyes. We see an eye on all three. So anything that you see here as a similarity. How does this provide evidence for evolution? So how does this explain that animals have kind of adapted from this one idea? Okay. Pause for section 5. Get 4 done. Let's move on. Station 5, biochemistry. Biochemistry is the study of small molecules that make up the body. An example is an important biochemical structure in the body called DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. DNA is the information center of the human body and carries important genetic information throughout life. Biochemistry provides evidence for evolution because all organisms use DNA to function and survive. This fact has influenced scientists to think all organisms come from the same ancestor. It is thought that more similar organisms' DNA sequences are, the more closely related the organisms are to each other, which makes sense. The DNA for me and my kids are much closer than the DNA for me and you. We are still both human. However, I am more closely related to my own children and my parents than I am to other humans that I'm not related to. So that makes sense. So DNA comparisons between humans and other species. So a human, 100% DNA, compared to a chimpanzee. They have 98% match to a human. A gibbon, 94%. A rhesus monkey, an 88%. Tarsier, 65%. A lemur, 47%. A mouse, 21%. And a chicken, 10%. So only 10% of our DNA matches that of a chicken. So the table above shows the similarities between human DNA and the DNA for other organisms. The comparisons was made using a small section of DNA. I have an activity with this. We do it with whales and dolphins, rhinoceroses, camels, giraffes, deer. That's a really fun one. You kind of write out the DNA gene and you count how many differences to see what's the most closely related. So too bad we can't do this. So this new species was discovered to only having 15% DNA binding with the human DNA. Cool. Okay. Number 5. Why is biochemistry considered the most powerful source of evidence for evolution? Most powerful source. So it's a study of DNA is the information center of the human body and carries important genetic information throughout life. This provides evidence because, ding, 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 all organisms use DNA to function and survive. Okay, look at the chart. We can see that the particular sections of humans and chimpanzees' DNA match up to 98% of the time, while humans and chickens match only 10% of the time. What does this suggest to scientists about how similar organisms look and the similarities in their DNA? So does it make sense looking at a chimp? Sorry, I was trying to be quiet. I don't want him to wake up. So if you look at the section of humans' DNA, we are 98% identical to a chimpanzee. How does this prove that DNA shows similarities in the fact that, I don't know, chimpanzees have four limbs, they have 2 legs and 2 arms, and they have hands and they have fingers. Their bones are very similar to ours. They are very smart. They have a mouth. They're very similar looking to humans. Whereas chickens, I mean, come on. They look nothing like us, right? So how does DNA prove, DNA compare to the similarities in organisms? Just give me your opinion. All right, number 3, imagine that you're a biochemist examining a species you recently found in the middle of St. Louis. This creature is pictured. You tested the organism's DNA, and you find that a certain section matches up with the human DNA 15% of the time. Do you think that this organism shares a recent common ancestor with humans? Explain why or why not. So what I would do here is 15%. Think of that number, and then look at the chart. 15% is that between a mouse and a chicken. Does a mouse and a chicken really look or behave anything like a human? Why or why not does this human have a recent common ancestor, or does this animal have a recent common ancestor with humans? All right, guys, that is the end of day 9 and 10. I will be putting up day 11 very soon. I hope your studies are going well. I'm also going to be putting up a video soon about feeling overwhelmed, which I know some of you are. So I hope you are doing well, and please email your teacher if you have questions. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.